so.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 115 of the HooperCast. It is I, Connor, and it is just I, Connor, this week. So if you're not a fan of just me, don't worry. I intend for this episode to be short. Coming at you guys on Wednesday night once again from the rented out studio space for the HooperCast. So last week it was just me and John. Dustin's having some logistical adjustments to make because he's doing some new stuff, and he's just got a life to live right now, and he's trying to get all his ducks in a row right now. So he could, not in a negative way, by the way. Dustin's fine, but he's just he's had some schedule changes that he's been trying to contend with, and he's just trying to make sure he's got everything in the correct place before he returns to the show. So Dustin is on indefinite, but very, very temporary hiatus for the HooperCast. So don't worry about Dustin. Dustin's fine. I was going to craft some elaborate ruse about how we're having a falling out, but it's just not worth it to burn the calories for that kind of thing. Not on the lies and the negativity, man. To be honest, everyone else I called for like a backup host the show is busy. So just me. So this will be a shorter episode just because, as you probably know from the other times this has happened, I just can't carry the show very well without a co-host. So I'll do my best, and with the magic of post-production, I'll try to do as little post on this show as possible, like always. But I'm just gonna have to edit out some gaps of me looking up stuff or stuff like that. Anyway, I wanted to talk about a couple of movies I'd seen recently. I had tried to see more movies that came out last year to kind of be more in line with just to be in line with most people who'd gone out to theaters in 2015 without obviously having spent the money to go see movies in theaters. And I'm not seeing every movie from 2015, but I'm seeing a lot of the ones that I would have seen in theaters if money was no object. That was 2014. Well, screw it. I'm still going to talk about it. This movie, although is not a 2015 film, it's actually 2014. So this won't apply to my best of list, but I did see the Kingsman, The Secret Service, which is a movie that came out in 2014, directed by Matthew Vaughn, and I believe it's based on a comic book. Although Rotten Tomatoes says it's 2015. When did this movie come out? Hold on, guys. I need to do some clarifying because I'm getting two different. Oh, it did come out in February? Really? Wow. February 13th. So this is almost a year ago to the day that this film came out. This weekend last year, this movie came out. Okay, this is 2015. That's right. Okay, cool. So it's directed by Matthew Vaughn, who a lot of people may know and love from having directed, Kick-Ass or what else? X-Men First Class. Let me check on Matthew Vaughn's most notable credits. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know. So Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Snatch. Really? He directed Snatch? Oh, sorry, producing. Okay, so he directed Layer Cake. I haven't seen that, but I heard it's good. Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class. Yeah. So Matthew Vaughn's a very established, but still probably undervalued, or at least underexposed director who can do good work. So Dustin and I had a conversation way back when about James Bond and how I liked the idea, although this may not be most people's picture of James Bond. I liked the idea. I've been talking a lot even before I came into the booth, so I'm sorry about my voice. I liked the idea that James Bond might be like a street brawler kind of a guy who somebody saw potential in and recruited to MI6, and he was able to pass all the weapons and the martial arts tests and all the physical tests pretty well without much training. They just sort of refined that area of his repertoire, but all the things about like dressing well and charm and picking up women and ordering drinks and stuff, that all was taught to him, and he went along with it because he figured, well, at the very least I'll learn how to get laid while we do this job. And then he just ended up staying in MI6. I know that that's not the official background of James Bond, but I always responded to that possibility because I thought that's interesting to me that somebody would essentially take advantage of the free training in order to just for personal gain, and ended up kind of staying. And that's kind of what happens in this movie. I draw the James Bond comparison also because, one, it's about secret agents, and two, they are not shy about alluding to James Bond or spy movies in this film as sort of like a self-referential poke fun sort of thing. It's kind of annoying after a while, but this movie, I would say it doesn't really star Colin Firth. It heavily features him and everything, but the actual star of the film is, well, he's not top billed, but it's Taron Egerton is like the main character. And he's a young kid whose home life is terrible. He's not like a thug. He's actually got a pretty good heart, but he's rough around the edges, but he doesn't really get in any real trouble. Colin Firth takes a liking to him, because his dad was a Kingsman way back in the day. And the Kingsmen are like this secret society of like, secret agents, and they all have code names once they get in. So Colin Firth is Galahad, and Mark Strong is Merlin, and so they're looking for a new Lancelot. And so they got like this whole training, thing going on. And also you've got Samuel L. Jackson's the villain of this movie, who's like this big tech genius kind of guy who's going to mind control everybody. I'll explain that in a little bit. That part's actually not too bad. So the movie is like half of it is really just the competition to become Lancelot, and then there's also like the actual climax of the film. So yeah, so I'll say this for the film. It's very entertaining, and look, if you haven't seen this by now, obviously you weren't interested in it at the offset, or else you would have gone to theaters for this film. This is a very good theater experience kind of film, probably would have been. Who cares? It will never play in theaters again, unless you own a home theater, unless you're like Mel Gibson or Kevin Smith or George Lucas or, somebody, Phil Rosenthal, somebody like that, who's got a home theater, but not us, guys, not us. What I'm going to say, though, is that I liked it. I tend to like movies that are a little bit more, I'm not going to say realistic, but while it's fun to watch, like, the secret door behind the bookcase and this elevator lowers really far down into like this underground layer underneath this, like, suit store. But to me, I'm at the point with movies where I'm thinking more like, okay, so what came first, the secret base underneath the suit store, or this whole city block that is in England that has to have been 2 centuries old? So was there always a secret bunker under this suit shop, or did contractors come in afterwards? And if that's the case, how does nobody know about it? Because wouldn't someone say, oh, there was some massive remodeling being done in this at the Kingsman suit shop that took like 6 years? Who takes 6 years to install, hardwood floors? Like, I get stuck on things like that because I'm like, how did they fit a big elevator in here? Like, this had to have been built after the fact, in which case, like, wouldn't this have drawn attention, or there'd be some sort of like, paper trail for this place having suspiciously, large amounts of money spent on remodeling, and you can't really see it in the woodwork or the finish or the crown molding, or where'd this money go? So I get stuck on things like that, or like, wristwatches that are gadgets, or significant little MacGuffin gadgets that serve the purposes of the story. How do they fund this organization? This and that. I don't like getting stuck on those kind of details, but I do. So you can't really think too hard about this movie because it's meant to be sort of tongue in cheek in terms of its plausibility, which is obviously like my main thing in movies is just plausibility. But that's also just the kind of movie it is, as well. So get past all the grand bells and whistles of what this plot is, and it's just really fun. It's just a straightforward, simply fun film. The weirdest part of it is probably Samuel L. Jackson. Again, he's playing a villain, and we've seen this guy among other roles, but recently, most popularly as Nick Fury. So in this movie, he's Calvin something, I don't know. But he dresses kind of like a rapper with like the track suits and the caps and the Jordans and whatever the kids are wearing these days. And for some reason, he opted to talk with a lisp. So his character's all talking like this, and I got all these SIM cards passing out all around the world. I shouldn't have done that voice. I should have just stuck to the script. Damn it. There's never in the story where you're like, I was bullied when I was a kid because I had a lisp. It's just like he just decided, I think I'm going to talk with a lisp for this film. And it's fine, but his whole plan is like, he's like this tech, mogul. So he's giving out free cell phones, but all the cell phones have like a SIM card that essentially acts as like a receiver for like this signal he can put out that can make that makes like their amygdalas and their brains go nuts or something. That being said, there's a really awesome fight scene, that takes place in like an old church or something where he does it. He inputs the signal. And essentially what the signal makes you want to do is it just makes you want to kill everyone in the room. And so Colin Firth happens to be in the room. So everyone tries to kill him in the room, and he just kills everybody in the church. And it's really fun to watch. And the whole point of it is supposed to be that Samuel L. Jackson decided that in order to save the planet, you had to thin the herd. So his whole thing was to like, it was like a mixture. You had to get this signal to happen, and then people would just kill each other, and one, the strong would survive, but two, anyone who paid him would get to sort of be in this like fortress bunker with him while it all happened, and then they'd walk out in a couple of months and there'd be a new world, and we wouldn't run out of natural resources because the population would be so low, and we'd start over. Never mind what that would do to the infrastructure and obviously the massive genocide of human life. But yeah, that's essentially why. So it's a pretty fun film. I really recommend it, especially since now it's out for rent. I'm not sorry I didn't see it in theaters, but I'm glad that I was able to catch it, and it was fun. I was never bored. I really wasn't. And that's important especially in movies like this where the bells and whistles of being a secret agent can kind of like muddle real character motivation or story or anything, but it did a fine job at that. So that's Kingsman. What I did enjoy a little more was Neil Blomkamp's movie CHAPPiE, which was his most recent film. Obviously, he did District 9 first, and then he did Elysium, and now he's done CHAPPiE. And so much like District 9, much of, I guess, not much of why I like it, but much of the charm District 9 had was the setting was Johannesburg, South Africa. Neil Blomkamp is South African. And so, the cast is South African. Mostly. There's Hugh Jackman, who's Australian. It's, pretty close. And Dev Patel, Indian, closer. So, closer to South Africa, I guess. But, you've got Sigourney Weaver, America. Okay, well, so my point, most of the cast is South African. So you've got like this inherent different feel to it than if it was shot in like Los Angeles, you know. It might have been shot in Los Angeles. I have no idea. But if it starred just a bunch of actors from California, the story is that Dev Patel works for this big sort of tech company that has essentially outfitted the police. The story is that crime in Johannesburg has gotten so high, the murder rate's skyrocketed. It's just at a record high. So they've agreed to work with this tech company who has basically developed robots to be, police robots. They're effective in combat and follow procedure and have really helped cut down on the crime, with also a remaining half of the police force being human beings. You know, the robots have really come a long way in cracking down on crime and cleaning up the streets, or at least beginning to clean up the streets. And Dev Patel, who a lot of people remember from Slumdog Millionaire, but Dev Patel in the newsroom, he's the one who invented these robots. He's just responsible for their creation. So he's doing real well. The police force has just ordered for another 100 to be manufactured and built. So he's doing well. And then you've got Hugh Jackman also in there, who is another weapons developer for the same company, but he used to be a soldier, and he was sort of, I guess I'm not sure if it's directly as a result, but picture him as like one of those guys who was sidelined by these machine jobs taking over human beings doing the jobs. So he's one of the guys who sort of had no recourse but to start developing weapons for that company. And he's just not as much of like a mind as Dev Patel is. So he's trying to make this big old, essentially this virtual reality controlled mech called the Moose, but it can't get picked up for production because it's overkill. Like, it has like cluster bombs, and they're like, dude, this is for like street crime, like theft and, armed robbery and stuff. Like, you got like this military robot. We can't put these on the streets of Johannesburg. So you've got that going on. And Dev Patel is frustrated because what he's been doing in his spare time is, researching and developing artificial intelligence. And he finally cracks it. We happen to walk into the movie on Dev Patel's second to last and last attempt at his second most recent and his most recent attempt. He literally, on his second try on screen, cracks the code to fucking artificial intelligence. So he basically he goes to his boss, Sigourney Weaver, about it. She's the CEO of the company, and she says, nope, no thanks. I'm not going to let you put that in any of these robots. So he grabs one that's targeted for demolition and puts the AI into it, he's going to, and on his way home, he is kidnapped by criminals. One of them's played by an actual actor. The other two are named Ninja and Yolandi, and they're played by a couple of South African hip-hop artists named Ninja and Yolandi, who've got their own sort of history and context. But if you don't know who they are, it doesn't really matter. But if you do, if you are aware of their music, it's like, oh, it would kind of be the same as if like Lil Wayne played a character named Wayne in a movie, but he was like an actual criminal. And also, if he did a pretty decent job, if not an excellent job, at acting. And being sympathetic. So at first I was just like, oh, because I remember when we talked about this movie on the Look Ahead on this show, we all made fun of the fact that one of there was a rapper who was in it named Ninja. And I was just like, oh God, this is, Marcus Warnstrom is not gay is the name of one of his songs. I remember that off the top of my head, by the way, because it stuck out so much. And I remember thinking like, oh God, like what's this movie about? But he does a good job. Anyway, they kidnap Dev Patel because they need money and they want to do a heist. And so they want to use one of the police robots. So they kidnap Dev, who just happens to have not only a police robot, but this artificial intelligence. So they put it in him, and he kind of agrees, like, they kind of agree to let him come back to help it learn, because the robots only last for about 5 days because of the battery. And Dev's whole point was, these robots can learn, but they're like children. They learn much faster than humans, but they start out like children. You can't just teach them how to hold guns. Like, you have to nurture them. So what he's getting out of the experience is he's getting to sort of nurture this AI he created, while their ultimate purpose for him is, but we're going to also train him to like shoot guns and like, rob banks essentially. So it's a pretty interesting dynamic you got here, because you got Hugh Jackman who's sort of hell bent on crushing Dev Patel because he wants a weapons contract and Dev Patel's in the way. Dev wants to nurture the artificial intelligence, but his company won't let him do it, and he's being forced to sort of do it by these criminals who want to use the robot to rob. And then you have the robot itself. So those are the human dynamics. Now let's talk about Chappie himself. So they name him Chappie, and he's played by Sharlto Copley, who people would know because he played Wickus, the main character in District 9, which is where I came along. He was the bad guy in Elysium, Neil Blomkamp's second film. He's also one of the guys in the A-Team. He played Hal and Mad Murdoch. And now he's Chappie in this film. So he's obviously a frequent collaborator and friend of Neil Blomkamp. And I really like Sharlto Copley. I like his accent. I like the timbre of his voice. I like how he can sound gentle, but he can also sound angry. I like this. I like the cut of his jib, and I think he's very, very charismatic on screen. So in this one, obviously, I thought that this was a motion capture performance because he's a robot that doesn't really have a face, and he's not human. They actually did not do motion capture for this. They shot him kind of on set for, and so the animators had reference, but they didn't actually put him in like a tracking suit with like the little body part sensors. I guess because it saves money. I'm not sure what the purpose of it was, but it looked fine to me. I didn't look at it and go, well, this certainly wasn't motion capture. I can tell you that much. So I really like Chappie because he starts out just like a child. He just doesn't know how to do things, but he learns so quickly. Just in one scene, you see his capacity of how quickly he can learn. And so he starts to call Yolandi mommy, and he starts to call Ninja daddy, and he starts to call Dev Patel maker. And so, of course, the criminals are trying to motivate him to do something that's ultimately wrong, but they also sort of start to become endeared to him because he's just so innocent. And I think that's what's most appealing about Chappie. That's like the key to to being sympathetic for him, is that he doesn't know any better. He's innocent, and he's being kind of slowly corrupted by these people or mistreated by them. And what does an AI with essentially a bad intentioned directive do? How does he know right from wrong, and how does he learn it, and what's his place in the plot, and what's he ultimately going to end up doing? Especially since he has a short lifespan. Like he becomes aware of it at a certain point in the film that he can't just go into a new body. He can't just get a new battery. The batteries are welded to the chassis of the robot because they're meant not to last very long. And I think one of the reasons, it's some sort of failsafe. So he even has an existential crisis, like when they explain to him what dying is and that, his body won't last. And the movie might jump the shark at the very end. I'm not going to spoil it because people haven't seen it. Maybe you don't want to see it, but people who've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, is at the end of the movie, something happens and, it's sort of just like, oh, okay, now we're just doing this and it works multiple times for multiple people. And okay, that's interesting. I guess that just works then. But I was fine with that because I was never caught up. And okay, look, if you haven't seen the film, just spoilers for a second. But for those who don't care about spoilers or who've already seen it, this part's for you. So at the end of the film, Dev Patel has been shot and he's dying. He's mortally wounded. And Chappie's already trying to transfer his consciousness into a new robot body. So not only does he transfers Dev Patel, he uploads his consciousness they do it early in the movie. Like they set up why you can even upload a consciousness or quantify consciousness. So first they quantify consciousness into like zeros and ones, and then they upload it wirelessly, by the way, into another defunct robot in the factory. It works on the first try, and it has Dev Patel's voice, and he's all fine. So then Dev Patel does it for CHAPPiE to a nearby robot wirelessly. It also works, and then they run out, and they happen to have Yolandi's consciousness because she was shot earlier in the film, and so they hack into the end of the film is they hack into the manufacturer, this company wirelessly, and build a robot that looks kind of like Yolandi in order to put her consciousness into it so she can come back to life, basically. And it's just like, okay, so we went from like, this is all theoretical to like, hey, we actually, not only can we do it, but we did do it. So people may have a problem with how quickly like the scientific capabilities of this universe progress within like this week the film takes place in. But at the same time, I thought of it like this. You know how, spoilers for The Prestige, you know how in The Prestige there's all the clones that Hugh Jackman made. And he has the point, Hugh Jackman, who's also in this movie. And he also makes the point that you never know what it's like, wondering if you're going to be the man who's going to come out of the box or go into it. What he's referring to is the magic trick where he falls into this, he gets zapped by the machine, and he is going to be, that Hugh Jackman will die. He falls into a tank that shuts and he drowns. And the new him that gets cloned appears over there at the other end of the theater. And so to everybody else, that's the same Hugh Jackman. Looks like him, talks like him, he finishes the trick, but it's not the same one that went in. But it is because he cloned himself. And so if you think about the concept of cloning yourself, you don't have to think of it like your soul transfers over into that body, because your soul dies with you, your soul doesn't move, because then you would just wake up in a new body. But you copy yourself in every single cell in your body, every single part of your consciousness and your awareness is copied. And so the person is you that you clone right off the bat, because it has your memories and your moods and inclinations, and it remembers what you had for breakfast that morning, and it remembers what you intended to do that night when you got to bed. But it's not you. It's just an exact copy of the very last moments of your life. So you can look at it as, well, that's interesting because that's Dev Patel, that's the maker, but it's not him. It's an exact copy, and it will never truly be him, but he doesn't know the difference because he thinks, he doesn't realize he just came into existence. He thinks that he's the same, you know what I mean? It's not really discussed in the movie, but that's how I think of it. So that kind of ending can be a jump the shark for people, because it kind of quickly gets to that point of, oh, okay, this is what we're doing now. But I really like the film. I love Sharlto Copley. I like it when he's being tender and vulnerable, and I also like when he gets angry, because he doesn't have like a very manly voice. He's just like, I don't know, Daddy, who killed Mommy? Who killed Mommy? Who was it, Daddy? And he's got the South African voice, and so it's speaking English, but it's still kind of foreign. It just has that. I just really like it, and I think when CHAPPiE came out, it was not well received. I think it got like a 30 or something on Rotten Tomatoes. And I like this movie. I really do like it. I liked it better than Elysium, that piece of garbage with Matt Damon in it. I don't like as much as District 9, but it's up there with it. I really do like it. I like Neil Blomkamp. Much like Matthew Vaughn, he's a young, relatively new director. Even Matthew Vaughn's been around for at least 10 years, but hasn't done a lot of films, but most of the films, and obviously in Neil Blomkamp's case, all the films he's done have been notable, and at least him as a director is notable, and we should keep an eye on him because everything he does is worth seeing. Kind of like Duncan Jones as well, Quentin Tarantino. That's kind of a broad example. He's a lot more successful and has a lot more mainstream appeal. But I really like Neil Blomkamp. So if you have not seen Elysium, go see it. Elysium. If you haven't seen Elysium, don't bother. But if you have not seen CHAPPiE, go see it. I think it's worth it. I think everyone's good in it. And especially Charlotte Copley, and especially speculative fiction. Again, my favorite genre, and I like that a non-human character was able to be made as sympathetic as Chappie was. And again, Ninja and Yolandi did a good job of acting as well, because you pick a couple rappers to act, you never know what you're going to get. But they turned in good, believable performances. And then the movie really depends on the strength of their performances, too, because they essentially shape Chappie in a way, especially Yolandi. Because, again, she's essentially like his mother. So that's those two. I also saw, real quick, I'm not going to say too much about it. I also saw the new Poltergeist, the reboot, or, the remake they did. I can't remember who the director was, doesn't matter. Sam Rockwell's in it, and then a bunch of people actors whose names I don't know. I am actually in the camp of, I think the original Poltergeist holds up, except for the scene where the guy's face is melting, where it's obviously like these are dated visual effects. Like, okay, clearly this is fake. But it holds up in every other respect, like the TVs and like the spinning objects in the room and the actual poltergeist behavior is all still very creepy to me. So I didn't really need this remake. I don't really watch a lot of horror movies because I do scare easy. But I wanted to see it because I just thought that the trailer looked good. The clowns were creepy, of course. That scene was pretty scary. But I agree with what the critics were saying at the time. They were saying this movie's, it's effectively executed, but it adds nothing new to the original story or to the genre itself. Like it's just a straight up remake. And it just doesn't lend a lot of new stuff to it, other than updating it with things like a drone flying into like the little demon realm and getting to see some of it. But it really doesn't add much at all. So I think it's worth skipping, to be honest. I don't think you really have to see the new Poltergeist. I thought it'd be so bad that it'd be funny, or at least pretty well done to where it's worth mentioning, but I don't think it was really worth making, and therefore I don't think it's worth you guys seeing it. So if you were planning on seeing Poltergeist, don't worry about it. I don't think it's worth it, so forget about it. Okay, I would like to remind all of you, of course, my dear listeners, that this episode is partially brought to you, sort of, by Letterboxd. Right now, listeners of our show have the chance to win a 1-year free pro account upgrade or extension on Letterboxd. For those of you who just don't know, you've been living under a rock or somewhere without internet or happiness, Letterboxd is a social network for film lovers that lets you track, rate, and review the films you watch. You can follow other members to get recommendations, or you can publish lists of films. It's free to use, but a pro account provides additional features such as a customized summary of your past year's viewing. So if you want to upgrade your regular account to a pro account, or you've got the pro account but you want to go another year without having to pay the premium, you can email us at HooperCast@gmail.com for your chance to win. Type the code word for February in the subject line. The code word for February is Paul, P-A-U-L, and include your Letterboxd username in the email so that we know who to award with, not just what your name is, because I'm not going to search your name on Letterboxd and try and find your username. You got to send me that information so I can just, throw it up the ladder and say, hey, it's this user. And they go, okay, cool. The winner will be selected at the end of each month, so there's still plenty of time to get in on the eligibility for the February drawing. And you can also follow our show on Letterboxd. Just search HooperCast. The great thing about Letterboxd too is, okay, so you say it's a social network for movie lovers. Okay, well, I like movies, but Facebook is fine. I like Facebook and I like keeping up with my friends and stuff. I'm not saying don't use Facebook, but what Letterboxd does have over Facebook, and I'm saying this as someone, by the way, Letterboxd does not pay us for these ads. It'd be great if they did, but that was not the agreement. So I'm not saying this as an employee or a contractor for Letterboxd. I'll say this. What's great about Letterboxd that is not great about Facebook is you're not going to find people on Letterboxd bitching about politics, especially in an election year. I feel like I can't navigate Facebook without seeing a bunch of people taking strange political positions that I either disagree with or I'm not interested in. And so if your main focus is movies, then why not just use Letterboxd? Because that's all that's on there is people's movie reviews, and you're learning about new films. You're reading other people's thoughts on films. You're seeing their lists, like, oh, the top 5 horror films of all time, top 5, action films, top 5 buddy cop films. It's just a great place to see that kind of stuff, and just, without having to search for it specifically on Facebook, just go to letterboxd.com and everything's already there, without free of a bunch of political, non-movie related bullshit. So again, that's letterboxd.com, letterboxd.com. Okay. I'd like to talk briefly about what's in theaters now. I'm not going to talk about any TV because I'm still watching the same kind of stuff, and I prefer to talk with Dustin about that in person. I haven't finished anything recently, so I'm still just working on and keeping up with shows currently. So I will not talk about that in this episode. But in theaters now, we got the same stuff from last week. We got Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. We got Hail Caesar and Kung Fu Panda 3, but we also got, now in theaters, Where to Invade Next, the next Michael Moore film, is an expansive, rib-tickling, and subversive comedy in which Academy Award-winning director Michael Moore, playing the role of Invader, visits a host of nations to learn how the U.S. could improve its own prospects. The creator of Fahrenheit 9/11 and Bowling for Columbine is back with this hilarious and eye-opening call to arms. Turns out the solutions to America's most entrenched problems already exist in the world. They're just waiting to be co-opted. I just said we wouldn't get political, so I'll keep it short. I'm sorry if I'm alienating listeners this way, but I just have to say this. Fuck Michael Moore. I think he's dishonest. I don't think he really cares about half the stuff he pretends to care about. And I think he just makes these films about American outrage because it sells tickets. I personally don't believe that America should go around apologizing for a bunch of stuff it does. And I also don't think that other nations hold the key to what makes America great, or what America should and shouldn't do. Because, and I'm sorry if I'm offending any listeners from other countries, I would expect you fully to support and sort of bolster up the image of your own country. But I'm not going to apologize for being a proud American. And I just think that the experiment that is America, these people coming over to this land in search of religious liberty, but also just the to be represented equally before the law and be able to vote for things, in a way that just wasn't happening at the time, especially in England, and to be taxed if they also had representation before their leaders. And I think that everything that made America great it came from other nations, and that it came from immigrants, but every time we were about to do something, we don't ask a bunch of other countries, do you think this would help us or hurt us? We just do it and we see what happens. And most of the time it's worked out pretty well. So I hate the idea that Michael Moore says, well, no one in our country knows what's best for us, so let's just ask other countries what America should do. Because other countries are going to say, well, they should trade more with us, but they should, let's do this bad trade deal, this bad trade deal. Other countries don't have America's best interest at heart. So why would you go make a movie where you just walk around and ask people, in China, hey, what's best for America? Well, they should trade more with us, but also let us make a lot of money off of trade with us. Okay, not really interested in what you have to say, because you have no skin in the game for America. So I hate to get political. I'm sorry. I put time code up so you guys can skip these sort of things if you're not interested, but I hate Michael Moore. And so, but if you love Michael Moore, you want to see this next film and you'll eat that shit up and you'll love it, man. But I'm just not buying what he's selling. There's also a movie called Touched with Fire with Katie Holmes. Don't know what that's about, so enjoy that. There's a movie called Providence. Don't know about that. Of Mind and Music. Sorry, don't know about that. Fatour. Don't know about that. How to Be Single. It seems like a good old-fashioned terrible February comedy, so I'm going to skip that. Zoolander 2 is also in theaters now. Again, February kind of scares me away from seeing this movie, but everybody's back, and hopefully it's good. So I'd be interested in seeing what the review. I don't think Rotten Tomatoes is going to treat that movie. I gotta be honest, I don't think that movie's going to do very well, and I don't think it's going to be reviewed very well. But I'll definitely at least rent it because I like Zoolander. But my pick is this week is going to be Deadpool. We've been talking about it for months on the show. Michael Grayson agreed that the ad campaign is so impressive for this film. And I'm personally, especially since Dustin's not here to say that he's not a fan of Deadpool. So, haha, Dustin, I get to talk about Deadpool and you can't say nothing. You can't say nothing. I'm not saying anything different than I've said before. I think that they're about to knock Deadpool out of the park. I won't be surprised if it's a horrible flop, but I think it's going to be a good film. And I don't think it has any early... Right now, according to Fandango, it's at 64 with the critics, which I would expect for an R-rated superhero movie that's going to be very heavily comedically based. Because there are going to be people who are going in there wanting a traditional story structure or a traditional kind of hero. And Deadpool is neither, and I expect it to be neither. So I sort of expected divisive reviews. So I do actually plan to see this movie in theaters. I think I'm going to go try and see it on Sunday, if I can. If I don't, then whatever. But if I do, I will talk about it next week on the show. But Deadpool is definitely my pick this week for what's in theaters right now. And I would be curious to hear from you guys on Twitter or in emails at HooperCast or HooperCast at gmail.com. I want to know what you think of any of these movies coming out. So please let me know. But that is it for what's in theaters now. That's also going to be it for the show this week. I'm not going to make a commitment about next week because I just don't know what's going to happen. But if I do see Deadpool this weekend, I will talk about it next week on the show. And I want your opinions. I want you guys to tell me what you thought of the film if you saw it. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Follow us on Letterboxd, iTunes, Stitcher, all those outlets. I'm having a little trouble keeping up with that kind of stuff right now. I've got a lot of stuff going on at my house as well, so I'm sorry if I'm late on certain posts or uploads or this or that. What will always go up first and as soon as possible is this podcast on Podbean and Stitcher and iTunes. YouTube is always going to be secondary to me. This is the first run theater. That's all second run kind of stuff. So until next time, this is Connor signing off with HooperCast for this week. Cheers. Have a good weekend. Go see some movies. Bye-bye.